Uh, we take the stance here at this church that much of the church has left the Old Testament behind. I heard a very famous young preacher say, a son of a very famous preacher say, we need to unhitch ourselves from the Old Testament. That is the scariest thing I've ever heard, one of them anyway. Because Jesus, it's interesting, said that all of these spoke of me. In fact, he says all of these speak of me. So what Bible did they have when Jesus was alive on the planet? He's still alive, but what did he have? The Septuagint, but he had the Old Testament. And the disciples had the Old Testament. And we have the Old Testament. And if all of these things spoke of him, doesn't it make you want to just go back and find out what that is? Like, when was the last time you read Chronicles? Some of those things are a little difficult. I understand that. But once you start getting in to what Jesus Christ meant, it becomes fascinating. It opens up your spiritual eyes, and I believe your spiritual life. And I believe, and what it's done for me, is enlivened my heart for what is coming upon us, and what is ahead of us. There is so much in the Old Testament that we have left behind, and it's a very, very sad thing. Jesus said in Matthew 24:3, this is after, by the way, he told Caiaphas and the high priest, you will not see the Son of Man again until you see him what? Coming on the clouds. And by the way, that goes back to Deuteronomy 32, where God rides on the clouds. Yahweh rides on the clouds. And that's over and over in the book of Psalms and over. And so, man, this was talked about thousands and thousands of years ago. So Jesus said, I'm coming again. And he's talking to his disciples, and he's talking to them in Jerusalem. And they're doing their basic meeting with his disciples. And then he has the private meeting, what's called the private meeting. He takes them to the Mount of Olives, where he has all of his private meetings with the disciples. Not all of them, but I mean. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives in the private meeting, Luke says, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be, and will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. So that's the first warning. Second warning, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Third warning, and see that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. And then he says it again, all these are the end of the age, right? No. All these are the beginning of birth pains. And then toward the end of the chapter, he says, when you see summer is near, the wheat harvest, the barley harvest is past, okay? The wheat harvest is coming. When you see summer approaching, so the wheat harvest is coming. The harvest of the wheat, the good grain. When you see that harvest coming, look up, because he's getting close. And that happens in the summertime. And so what he's saying is this. He's telling the believers, you're going to see a convergence, a beginning of these things. And this church takes that literally. And we want to understand what he meant. Because I am of the belief that as we go further down, anybody been kind of alarmed in the last 5 years? Last 7 or 8 years? We see some things happening around us and we go, this is crazy. And not just in one place, all over the planet. And so we say, well, what do we want to do with this? Just like bury our heads? We're just going to say, it's no big deal. This has all happened before. We had World War I and World War II. You did not have World War I with Israel in the land. And shall we go on with all the things that are taking place? So that's why we do Sunday nights, so that we can watch together. And we can even get alarmed together. And then we can encourage each other through the word and once you bury that hatchet, if you will, then you're not afraid to see what's coming next. Then you're ready for whatever's around the corner. And we're going to do this together. Because folks, it's going to get crazy. Summer's going to get crazy. And in fact, already is. And so we want to do this together and comfort one another and be ready for with one another as these things approach, okay? So what we do on Sunday nights is we look through some of the news, the weird stuff. I heard a great preacher the other day say, if it's weird, it's important. And it's in the Bible, it's weird, it's important, and even in our news. So we're going to go through some of the news, and then we've got a very interesting scriptural update at the end. Just, you know that I look at earthquakes because Jesus said, and I've been doing this since I was in the Air Force. I just took it up as a hobby. I'm not a professional seismologist, but I like looking at them, these and volcanoes. And what do you see when you look on there? You see a line that goes from north to south, and you see equivalent seismology there of 4s and 5s, about the same exact size all the way down there. That means there's a lot of pressure coming in the northwest United States, and it just goes down that thing. It just goes down the rim, goes down. All that pressure comes from east to west. And it's basically coming down around the Alaska Loop. It comes across the ocean. That's why you have this. That's why you have these fault lines. You're going to see these things follow these fault lines. But the main one is along the coast, and that's why they're always concerned about Oregon, California erupting someday, and someday over the rainbow maybe. But we'll just But the point is, it's just very interesting to watch. The hurricanes. Remember what we're using now. Not our favorite word, but the most prevalent word we've used in the last couple of years. What is that word? Unprecedented. Unprecedented. Records after records after records continue to grow. And so we had the earliest storm on record already this year. It was in the Pacific last week, or 2 weeks ago actually now. It was the earliest record. That's 3 years in a row. We've been breaking early records and all this kind of stuff. Here is 3 storms that we're watching at one point this last week. You know that there was 2 side by side there, and then the one hit the coast. Tropical Storm Claudette. She didn't turn into a hurricane, but she did a whole lot of damage and a whole lot of flooding, and she's not done. She's going off the coast, and we'll see what happens after that. But that's an early onset. And things are ramping up in the Atlantic again. It's at this point that I want to say something about global warming, okay? I want to say something about global warming. God has always had global change. In fact, he promised, after Noah's Ark landed, he promised that there's going to be seasonal changes. And he likes changes. And we had, I think there was wasn't there a mini ice age back in the 13 or 1400s, I can't remember when it was, but it was in the dark
1500 to
1500. So it was in the dark ages, I guess. So things have been always kind of strange on the planet, but remember, we're looking at convergence of unprecedented stuff. Parts of Russia Arctic have been 10 degrees Celsius hotter than normal, so they're watching that. The UAE is breaking records, extreme heat, and the Sultanate, they call it, of Oman, with 51.6 degrees Celsius. What is that? It's 125 degrees.
Wow.
No, thank you. It's a dry heat, folks. It's just a dry heat. Look at that.
Lethal.
Yes, lethal. Yeah. I was up in the attic Friday, running cable, and it was not healthy. Let's just put it that way. It was not healthy. I was up there too long. Salt Lake City, 107 ties a record. Denver, 101 breaks a record. Billings, 108 ties a record. Laramie, Sheridan, Casper, Needles, Palm Springs, Las Vegas, and Phoenix all either tie or are breaking records. So what is happening on the global planet? well, it's shift of the El Nino and the El Nina and all these kinds of things. But we're just going to continue to watch these things, because remember what we're saying here, that when you're watching the sun and what it's doing, and the magma and what it's doing, it has nothing to do with weather, all right? And wars and rumors of wars, people like to say that has something to do with weather. It has to do with the droughts, so people have to eat, so they, covet other people's borders and stuff. That Jesus said all this stuff is going to come about, and so we're just continuing to watch this stuff. Extreme drought continues in the southwest. That high pressure system is going to break down. Hopefully some lows are coming in there, and some tropical storms give them some weather. But it is really, really bad all the way through the United States. I think we're officially in a drought here in the Midwest as well. So this is really interesting, because now Russia went over and they annexed Crimea during the Obama administration. All right, those are the facts. If YouTube wants to shut me off, they can. And we have a treaty with Crimea, which we should have went over there and at least warned them not to come in. We didn't do anything. We let them take Crimea, and now they want Ukraine, and they want Moldova and Belarus and other places. Well, since that happened, this place has been completely drying out. A drought, rivers, I think a year or two ago I showed you a picture of a rock, a carved rock in the bottom of a river, or near the bottom of a river, where it's hundreds of years old. It says if it gets this low, it's drought season, and it was done hundreds of years ago. Anyway, well, things have changed. 1,000 residential houses flooded the other day. The storms were so bad. There's a man walking in the rain, and flooding in this region. 8 districts declared emergency situation. A bridge collapsed because they got so much rain. So they're disaster from droughts, and now disasters from rains. It was so bad that they had to shut off the water system, the drinking system, because of pollution and all this other stuff. So the sewers overflowing, and they can't catch a break over there in Iran. They have droughts, and then floods is happening there, as well as so many other places. Let's talk about this. This is just not a very fun subject sometimes. I remember, it wasn't a decade ago, looking at statistics on the number of people in the United States who were agreeing with the gay lifestyle, gay marriage, and all those kinds of things. And so let's put it at 15 years. I don't think it was that long ago, but I think it's 10 years. But let's say 15 years. 15 years ago, if 3% of the population of the United States agreed with the homosexual lifestyle. In other words, 15 years ago, 3% of the population said it was okay. We agree with it, it's not a problem. But look now, a Gallup poll, and remember, we watch Lifeway, Gallup, and Pew, those 3 in particular. They're very, very good and honest. Gallup poll on same-sex marriage, a wake-up call for the church. The newest poll of Americans shows an overwhelming majority supports same-sex marriage, and the prominent pastors lay the blame on the church, whose influence appears to be waning. Appears to be waning? There's no appearance. One surprise in the poll is politics. 55% of self-identified Republicans support homosexual marriage, the first time that number has been over 50 in Gallup's tabulation. So it continues to go up. And everybody, see, what happens is it's the frog in the kettle, that things continue to happen, and it's okay. It's acceptable. Now, I want to go back, and this is fact again, that when President Obama took office, he was not for homosexual marriage. But just before he left, or just a year or so before he left, he changed his mind. All right? And then the Supreme Court changed things, and things just beginning to change. And from then, I believe it's just kind of snowballed. And all of a sudden, in let's say 5, 6, 7 years, we went from maybe it was 10% at that point to numbers like this. It's just really crazy, because hey, it's their life, and let them do it. And I understand that. I totally get that, because this is the United States, and we can say and almost do what we want. unless it's harming somebody else. But I'm going to say something here. Ready? America is not a Christian nation. Okay, it's not. Okay, it was even Jefferson, who was a deist, he was not for Christians bringing their Christianity into the office, into politics. Did you know that? He was not for that. But this is what he said, and I'll paraphrase for him because I don't want to misquote him. I'll paraphrase him. He said, but since we are a Christian nation, we should allow it as people vote these people into office. And that's what happened. The nation was Christian in general. And we voted people in the office and we went by Christian principles in general. But not everybody was. And we definitely are not now. Okay? The genie is out of the bottle, Pastor Jeffress says. He's the church. He is the head pastor of the Church of Dallas. What that means for the church, he says, is that faithful Christian believers who believe God ordained marriage as a sacred union for a man and a woman are becoming a minority in their own country. Many just don't know it yet, and this is really the fact. I hear these statistics all the time about there are 50 million evangelical Americans who need to vote their convictions, he says. Look, if there are really that many evangelical Christians in this country would look much different than it does right now. Now, we go back to when Trump was running for office, and I was surprised. I was sitting here, and I was surprised at looking at the board and saying that evangelicals are going for Trump. Now, remember, and I'll say this publicly again, I didn't like Trump at first. I like what he did with the nation when he got in. I don't like his he's a proudful man, and God resists the proud, okay? God resists the proud. But what he did for the nation was good. But when it said the evangelicals were going for Trump, I said, who are evangelicals? How come they're not voting for Huckabee? How come they're not voting for others, good Christian men? And at that point, I started questioning what it meant to be evangelical in the United States. And to be frank, I'm still questioning that. I heard MacArthur and some others talking about this the other day. It's an interview they did some time ago. They started thinking about changing the term from evangelical. Remember, it was fundamental, then they went to evangelical, now we should change that term. And they said, no, we're going to fight for the name evangelical because it really, means something, and we should stick with it. And maybe we should. But to be frank with you, what does it mean anymore? It's questionable, and we have to come to bear what the church is standing for and what it believes. Most people, here's really, I think, what's going on. Nobody wants to fight. Nobody wants to fight. Nobody wants to fight with their family members, their friends. And I'm not saying that we should pick a fight. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, we have good friends. We have good friends who have children who are gay. And now they've changed their views. Do you remember what Jesus said about changing your views? I will bring a sword between a mother and a daughter. That's what he said. Between a father and a son. Don't change your views. Don't change your views. I just contacted this person here. Her husband is a pastor in the Philippines. We've got now 3 people in the Philippines I'm connected with, and one other in Africa as well. What a pity for the church that no children of God for 2 Sundays. Hoping and praying if God won't come back, it will be over. She's very, very concerned. Now, I did get a post this morning that they did have some folks show up to church, but they're very concerned. And we haven't heard from Barrio. I haven't heard from Barrio in 2 months. And so I don't know what's happening with him and his family over there. It's very disheartening. Another pastor in Canada arrested for holding a home church meeting. China sends, these are some headlines, China sends astronauts to its own newly launched space station. China sends 24 jets, that's misspelled, over Taiwan in 1 week. North Korea is running out of food. Juneteenth is a bill now. I mean, it's actually passed, right? And Texas continues the border wall. Just some headlines that I just didn't have time to really go over, but that pastor is very sad. I thought this was interesting. Donald Trump was concerned, should I say concerned? I almost want to say whining. He really kind of was this last week. In an interview, I did the Heights, so he did the Golan Heights, he did Jerusalem, and I did Iran. So in other words, he's saying, I helped build up Israel. I believe we got 25% of the Jewish vote in America. And it doesn't make sense. And it just seems strange to me. Trump added, Jewish people who live in the United States don't love Israel anymore. Does that make sense to you? I'm not talking about Orthodox Jews. And he's absolutely right. That America is their home. They have no concern for Israel. They do not want to go back. And there's really no concern. I do have I don't know if it's next or not, but there are Jews returning home, but they're being persecuted where they are and returning home. They need to. It's reminding of World War II. How did God start Israel back up? How was she born in one day? Do I want to say he started World War II? No, Hitler started World War II. Or, whoever. I'll leave that to the historian. But God said, I'm going to take them back home. He uses all good, all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And his purpose was Aliyah, go up to Israel. And Isaiah chapter 60, I believe, nation born in a day, right? Israel's born in a day. And how did they get born again? Or born as a nation, I mean. They had to go home. And what was the thing that brought them home? War. Now, what percentage of the Jews live in the United States? I know a couple of us know. Say it. About half. 50%. There are 7 to 8 million Jews in the United States. All right? How do they get home? I'm not saying they all have to go home, because at one point, Jesus says he goes and gets the elect from the four corners of the earth. So that's not a problem. I understand that. But there's no way in my mind, I'm thinking through the tribulation, that half of the Jews are not at home. I think a good percentage of them will go. Something has to happen. I don't know what, but it's a very interesting concept. Before we get into the Middle East, just some things that continue to happen around the world, okay? Africa is a complete disaster. I mean, it is a mess. Moscow is taking over now. Nigeria, Turkey is trying to take over Somalia and some other places. It's just a complete disaster. This is Ethiopia alone. And all the striped areas are conflict zones. So they started that little mess up there in Tigray in the north, and now it just blew up. And somebody, I don't want to say prophesied this, they know Africa pretty well. And they said, once it started in the north, there's so many tribes in Ethiopia, it's just going to fracture, it's going to split. And this is considered a Christian country, by the way. And so is Nigeria, and Nigeria is a complete mess right now. It's really, really bad. They're killing Christians all over the place. It's horrible. Another place in Africa is Egypt. It stands to lose 72% of the farmland over the dam. We continue to bring this up on Sunday nights every once in a while to remind ourselves that this is going to be a big issue. That Ethiopia is raising the waters on one of the largest dams in the world, and they're afraid it's going to shut down the Nile. I'm not sure, after it fills up, will it continue to flow as high as it does? But the point is, Ethiopia will have control of the Nile, and Sudan is getting much more aggravated at it. They've been kind of moderately upset. Egypt's been totally upset and threatening war. And now the statistics are coming out that about 70 to 75% of the land is going to be... Remember, they feed 500 million people right on the Nile alone. And so this is going to become a big deal in the years to come, probably fairly soon. Pro-Haftar, this is in Libya. Remember now, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, all those places are in Ezekiel 38, or have something to do nearby there in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So this is in Libya, put in Ezekiel 38. Pro-Haftar sources are stating that there are Turkish and GNU preparations to attack Al Jafra Air Base with a Turkish military operation room in Tripoli. So we thought this thing was settled down. There's no way. This guy, Erdogan in Turkey, is a really bad guy. He's playing both sides. He wants NATO's help. He's running out of money. Actually, he's out of money. Totally out of money, but he doesn't care. He's kind of like the Iranian Khomeini. He doesn't care. He wants the Ottoman Empire back, and he wants oil. Biden says he has a, now watch this. Biden, this is going to be a clue for the rest of the briefing, by the way. Watch. Biden says he has a positive and productive meeting with President Erdogan. You know why? He's not standing up to him. He's not saying, you know, let me tell you what my intelligence tells me. I'm not going to give you secrets, but I know what you're doing in Libya. I know where your troops are, and I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing in Syria. I know these things. And you know what? You're not going to do it. Or if you don't want to do that, then say, I'll tell you what, I know what you're doing. We're going to let you do it. One of the two. But don't say you have a positive and productive meeting, because you're not. Biden, some people say Biden doesn't know what he's doing. I'm going to tell you this. He's been doing this for 50 years. He has all his people in place. He knows what he's doing, but he's being pressured by so many people that he doesn't know what to do. Does that make sense? He really doesn't know where to go. He is being pulled to the globalist side of the EU. In fact, he's already there. He's locked arm with all the gray hairs and the EU, and they're going to strengthen that coalition, and now they're going to try to save Africa. Now they're going to try to ward off Russia. Now they're going to try to ward off China. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I see, okay? This is what I see to this. It's too late. It's too late. Because of the convergence of these things, God has let Magog get such a strength, and Putin hates America, and Iran hates America, and Turkey hates America. They're sick and tired of our hegemony, our leadership, our state policemen. They don't like us, and they want us out of their business. Now, it used to be where we had all the power and the money, and we would say, shut up and put up. Those days are over. Those days are over. And they're gonna play Biden like he was a fiddle. Sudan, here's one example of this. Trump talked Sudan into making a peace treaty with with Israel. Sudan is part of Kush, all right? It's part of the Global League, or the Northern League, that will come into Israel in Ezekiel 38, whenever that happens. 5 years from now, 10, we don't know. It will happen. Now, so they signed this treaty with Israel, and they said, everything's going to be great. We're going to do this, or we're going to do that. Well, this last week, they're not so happy. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why. But Sudan, by the way, they're standing on the Israeli flag there. Sudan is disappointed with the outcome. Oh, so they expected something big. They're disappointed with the outcome of the normalization agreement with Israel amid its insufficient U.S. investment in the African country. According to an Israeli report Wednesday morning, many months after the deal was signed, Washington hasn't fulfilled its promise to invest in agriculture and technology projects in Sudan, the Khan public broadcaster cited senior sources in Khartoum as saying. Now, what do you think's happening? You heard maybe last week that the Biden administration said we're not going to use the term Abraham Accords anymore, right? What do you say? That the peace treaty that Trump was able to get between Israel and so many of these nations is now not very important. But we already seen this coming, because Biden has thrown Saudi Arabia, the big king, under the bus and letting Houthis bomb them and do whatever they want with them. So it is a complete disaster in the Sinai Peninsula and in Africa. And Biden, he wants to save these poor people. But if it comes to a Trump peace agreement, if it comes to anything doing with that kind of stuff, he's going to throw it under the bus just because his people don't like Trump. His people don't like what he did and all those kinds of things. They don't care for Israel. I'm going to say this, they care for Israel only to a certain extent because in tradition, the Democrats have stood up for Israel to a certain extent. However, not when it comes to the global network. And now, the Israeli coalition, by the way, that voted in last week, now they are a global coalition. We talked about that last week, we'll get that into that. But Netanyahu, the Trump of the Middle East, if you will, he's out. And who's in? The Middle East Biden administration, is, if you want to look at it that way. Paris slams, so now we're going to get into some G7 stuff. Anybody know what G7 is, right? You saw that in the news. We're going to get into some global stuff and watch people, it's just crazy what is happening. Watch what happens. Paris slams Moscow for what it claims is a seizure of power in the Central African Republic. Now, if you remember right, France had an empire. And most of their empire was where? Africa. Okay? So they want Africa back. But we'll see. This global empire is going to launch, lock arms to try to get their empire back. We'll see what happens. The United Nations says we are preparing for the possibility of an increase in violence in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of U.S. forces. An official in the European Union, we are concerned about the deteriorating security and economic situation in Iraq. Folks, the world is just coming in on itself. It's really a huge division. China is over there. It's by itself. Now it's trying to link arms with Russia, but Russia hates China. Don't get me, don't let anybody fool you. They hate each other, but they'll use each other if they have to. And then China's just going to eat up all the ports and all the oil they can, okay, by treaty and threat and power, all right? Then you've got Moscow, and they've got their little coalition, and they're trying to link arms with Turkey, but they hate each other too. They've been at war for hundreds, thousands of years, and they hate each other. But now they're going to link arms because they hate the United States, right? Now the global coalition, that's the EU and the United States, we're linking up arms again, So now you've got a huge division. People have to pick sides. It's the East and the West, and then kind of China by herself. That's really where it's coming down, and it's going to continue to pull itself apart because these people are not giving way. You know why? Because America has lost her leadership. She lost it 10 years ago, okay? And I don't think it's coming back. We'll see. The Taliban, we're leaving Afghanistan. What a wreck. We were there for 20 years, lost thousands of lives. I'm not sure we should have went there permanently in the first place. We should have went there and did something and left. But now we've lost thousands of lives. All of a sudden we're leaving. Guess what? The Taliban are taking over the country. The United States is about 50 to 60% out right now, and they are taking over the land. Taliban militants captured 2 more districts in the north of Afghanistan. Here's another one. This just today. Afghanistan Taliban has captured another district. I'm sorry, I think it's this one is today. Yeah. Districts of, and then they name these 4 districts. Province has fallen into the hands of the Taliban without a fight. There's policemen going over to the Taliban. There's Afghan soldiers going over to the Taliban. This terrorist, one of the biggest states there, is going to be a huge, huge mess. We didn't do a thing there. We didn't conquer, we didn't do anything. And it's really a sad thing. So these people, see this group? This group, you can't read this. It's the meeting of the ministers of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. So I think I have a map here. Yeah, there's the map. This is the global coalition to whip ISIS, all right? First of all, they haven't done it. Trump did more in his 4 years than all of them put together. He really did. Wiped out the caliphate. They're on their way back. We'll see what happens. But they're going to come together. They have been. This is a coalition that's been built for some time. All right. And what I'm suggesting is this coalition comes together to fight this bug, ISIS. What other bug? The virus. What other bug? Climate change. What other bug? The economy. You see where we're going? These people think they can handle these problems. What did God say? I will bring them down. I'm going to bring down Gog. I'm doing this. This thing's going to happen because it's my terms and not theirs. They're going to come together in these conspiracies against what they think is the world. So now that's the coalition of, I can't remember how many nations. This is the coalition, this is the G7. So this reminds me of Revelation. The 7 heads and the 10 nations. You got 7 heads, you got 7 kings. And there's 9 here because they're doubling up. There's some coming in, coming out. But there's 7 of these G7s. And watch what they do. All right, watch. They're going to put in a corporate tax across the board for the world for at 25%. They're going to tell the world corporations, you're going to pay 25%. Okay, what's wrong with that? They're going to come and tell your company in the United States to pay 25%. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I'm saying it's none of their business. I'm saying the United States government does that. But they've been trying to do this under NAFTA and all those other things for a long time under the Bush administration. This global idea has been coming since Clinton and Bush and others, okay? City of Lights and all that kind of stuff. Today, the leaders of NATO countries are set to agree on a climate action to plan to make their armed forces carbon neutral by 2050 and to adapt to threats posed by global warming. And what I say, you know what I say? Good luck. Good luck. NATO allies will agree at a NATO summit today that an attack in space from a weapon fired from Earth against a satellite could trigger an Article 5 response, the principle of collective defense. Folks, when Crimea was taken over by Russia, did we go to their defense? So I say, good luck, because Russia's not paying attention to you, and neither is China. They don't care. You're going to see. We condemn Iran's support for proxy combat forces and non-state armed actors. They've been condemning Iran for the last 10 years and yet giving them billions of dollars. The G7 supports the resumption of the nuclear deal talks and calls on Iran to stop its missile activities. They are this close to getting a nuclear weapon. Do you think they will ever stop? No, because then they'd have to give all that work up. It is not going to happen. They'll bury it underground further if they have to. Macron reveals that during his meeting with Erdogan, which Biden did, he stressed the importance of NATO members clarifying their common strategy. Sorry, I have to laugh. Because Erdogan's been in NATO's face for the last 2 years, 3 years, actually more. He's saying to them, I'm going into Libya, I'm going into Syria, I'm taking this, I'm taking that, and you're not going to do anything about it. And even Trump gave in to him. He gave him the 35-mile depth stretch along Syrian border and said, come on down. He gave in to Erdogan. So the communique read, China's stated ambitions and assertive behavior present systemic challenges to the rules-based international orders and to areas relevant to alliance security. The 79-point document warned China was rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal and being opaque in implementing its military modernization. It also pointed out Beijing's military ties with Russia in their actions in the Euro-Atlantic region. All true. All true. What are they going to do about it? China's response. On the final day of the summit, a London-based representative of China's embassy said The days when global decisions by a small group of countries are long gone. Folks, there's a cavern as deep as Sheol, Isaiah chapter 7, between the east and the west. And how are you ever going to get it back? I don't see it coming back. I don't see how it can. You see, you have to remember something. In World War II, after World War II, when the United States did the industrial might, it did the industrial buildup, and it had all the power and all the money, and it promised the world everything, but it also warned the world that we're going to help you, we're going to give you lots of money, we're going to give you lots of security. See all of our ships? They're going to be all around the world. We have really one of the best blue water fleets in the world we have for the last 70 years. A blue water fleet is I can go to China without refueling, and that's us. But folks, those days are over, because China's sick and tired of that, and so is Russia, so is Iran, so is Turkey, and even honestly, so is Germany. They're tired of us. And when Trump was there, you could tell how tired they were of us. They were about ready to part ways. But when Biden stepped back in, see, now the old globalist is back in town, and now we can help the EU build up their military and help them along. You see, that's where we're at right now. And China's saying, I don't care how big you guys get. I don't care. We don't care anymore. We do not care, and neither does Russia. And remember, they hate each other, but they're going to work with each other. They look like friends. They are not. They are not. The high-level Chinese defection. There was a high-level Chinese defection this last week. It was rumored, but it did take place. The State Security Vice Minister Dong, you can pronounce his name, defection would be the highest ever in the history of the People's Republic. Dong is or was a longtime official in China's Ministry of State Security, responsible for counterintelligence, since being promoted to vice minister in April 2018. If the stories are true, he would be the highest level defector in the history of the People's Republic of China. And the word is out, and this is fairly new. He hasn't said anything, hasn't made any statements or anything, but China seems to have. They are very concerned about what this man knows, and they would sure like to have him back, dead or alive.
What has become of Chiang Kai-shek?
Joe?
He died a long time ago, I think.
Yeah.
Chiang Kai-shek, yeah.
Yeah.
Taiwan?
He passed away. He was during World War II, so long time ago.
So the president of Ukraine, now we're going to wind up the G7 summit, okay? What does it look like? What are the results of the G7 summit? The president of Ukraine says NATO has agreed to admit Ukraine into an alliance. Now, where did he hear that? We don't know. We really don't know, but he said it. And he blurted this out on this little Tweety Bird thing, the social media. He blurted this out. And I tell you what, Biden was all over this like, wait a minute, that's not true. Because what does that do? That spits right in Russia's face, okay? The Kremlin, Ukraine's accession to NATO is a red line that should not be crossed. And that's the truth. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Here's some other things that came out of the summit. Biden concludes the first G7 as the president declared, America is back at the table. Okay, Biden confuses Libya with Syria. Three times in one short interview. I watched it, I saw him do it. Boris Johnson introduces South Africa's new president, and then Biden interrupts, and I saw this too. Because I don't want to take everybody's name, word for it. I want to see what happened. And so Boris Johnson is kind of running this thing, and he's introducing people, and then he says, now we got a new president, South Africa, and he's introducing him, and Biden interrupts him and says, you should introduce the president of South Africa. I want to laugh, and I sort of kind of did, but I got to stop myself. Because remember when he was stumbling up the stairs? I'm telling you folks, this is a judgment on America. This is judgment. While speaking, Biden trailed off before accusing Russia of biting off some serious problems they're going to have trouble chewing. He then called on Russia to invest in Libya because they're there, mistaking Libya for Syria. A third time. Then Biden says, I don't think Putin wants a Cold War. We're already in a Cold War. This Cold War started a few months ago. What's the words? It's on its way. It's there. Now, it was sort of on its way during the Trump administration, but Trump was able to kind of ward it off a little bit. No, it's there now. Putin said he had discussed the Arctic in detail with Biden. According to him, the U.S. concerns about the militarization of the Arctic is absolutely unfounded. We are restoring the destroyed infrastructure there. So Russia is flying bombers to the Arctic to fix infrastructure. I don't think you need bombers to fix infrastructure. If Biden buys that, he's got a problem. And then this out of Iran, this just happened a couple of days ago. Iran sends a message to Biden. The boycott of the election, so Iran had an election, and most of the people, over 50%, seem to have boycotted the election. The boycott of the election led to the lowest turnout in the 42-year history of the Islamic Republic. Of over 59 million eligible voters, only 48.9% of the eligible people voted, and he won in a landslide. Who is this guy? They call him the Butcher of Iran. Back in the 80s, he came up through the ranks. He was a judge, and he had thousands of people massacred. And so he is a really, really hardliner, a bad guy. I want to remind you, they have the IRGC and the Khomeini, the Ayatollah comes out of this, so he has to be one of those members. And then they pick the president. They say, well, these people can run. And they have, they shrugged off a lot of people running this time. They let this guy run. In fact, I think they made him win. And he is right out of this core here. So what can we look for going forward? The same kind of stuff and probably even more. Hating Israel, wanting Israel dead and off the map and all that kind of stuff. So this happened there as well. Supposedly, OANN claims Justin Trudeau was overheard saying something very damning about Biden during the G7. What was that? He says that Harris is going to be president by the end of 22. He says that at G7 summit. Now, first of all, if he said that, his country ought to fire him. And second of all, that just sends a message around the world. It's a very scary thing. I already said that. It's time to end the special relationship between Israel and the United States. This is an opinion, okay, that was written. The departure of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday was met with an audible sigh of relief from pro-Israel Democrats. The man they deemed primarily responsible for the turning of Israel into a so-called partisan issue was gone, at least for a while. Some advocates of the U.S.-Israel relationship now see opportunity to improve Israel's reputation on the left. A recently released working paper by academics provides hard data and analysis on the growing opposition in Israel among American liberals and progressives, especially among young people. Their data shows that neither Democrat or Republican support for Israel should be taken for granted. You know what? This is exactly what's happening with the post-Trump era. The exact same thing is happening. They were both in legal issues. They were both hated by the governments. They were both hated by a lot of the world and the young people and all those kinds of things. And they're both kind of going down the same road, only to come up the nation itself coming up in a bad situation. So about Israel, Pentagon confirms removal of troops and air defense assets from the Middle East. Now, as we go forward here, whenever I talk about this kind of issue with Israel, I just want to remind you of something, okay? I always want to remind you of something. We cannot put Israel up as an icon. She is a problem right now. She is in the face of her God. She is backslidden, to say the worst, or least, okay? She is in a bad place. But the promise on her from Abraham is eternal. And the tribulation is happening because of Israel to get her back in the fold. Okay, we all understand that. So, when you go back to the Abrahamic covenant, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And Trump, whatever you think of him, did a lot for Israel. All right? Now, what is Biden doing? He continues to do the same thing. The Pentagon confirms removal of troops and air defenses assets from the Middle East. He is telling the Arabs, you're on your way, folks. You're on your own. You're on your own. We're going to help you a little bit. We'll be there. Oh, we can get there in a quick, whatever. But we're kind of, and they've already stated before they even came in, they want out of the Middle East as much as they can. But what does Zechariah 9 say? Or 14. I will make Jerusalem a stumbling block, a cup of stumbling. And he's going to draw all the attention to the Middle East. God is. He's going to make them choose. He's making the church choose as well. The Pentagon is withdrawing Patriot batteries from Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. They're removing a THAAD system, huge system, from Saudi Arabia, reducing fighter jet squadrons in the region and sending some troops home while relocating others. So this is not bad. This is not good. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? They want to strengthen the West. They want to see if they can get a hold of Africa. They want to keep Russia at bay. They want to compete with China. They want to compete with China. They don't want to be buried in a war, spiritual war, that's been going on in the Middle East for thousands of years. But God's not going to let them get away with it. And we're just going to have to continue to see. This comes at a time of increasing attacks by the Iranian proxies in Iraq against American forces. The U.S. has deployed Patriots to Iraq alongside the CRAM and other systems to protect U.S. forces in 2020. Now, new drone threats are emerging in Iraq. Iranian-backed Houthis also uses drones and missiles to attack Saudi Arabia, and Iran attacked the kingdom in September 2019 with drones and cruise missiles. It is amazing. Iran and Turkey are transporting these drones to other countries. They're cheap to build. Now they're giving them to other countries, and they're using them against our supposed allies, Israel's supposed allies. We'll see what comes of this. Back to Israel for a minute. This is their coalition. This is now their government. Remember what Amos says. Can two walk together unless they agree? So you have Muslims here, you have conservatives, you have left-wing Democrats, if you call them. And so the Muslim man, Abbas, said, our vision is to live in peace, equality, and cooperation. And then he vowed in Arabic that his party would return the lands which were appropriated for our family or our people. This is a national act of the highest order. Okay, so now we know where you stand in Arabic, at least. This is a government that's supposed to be the most democratic government and our biggest ally in the Middle East.
So a little explanation about how that works. So a parliamentary system has a ton of little parties.
Yeah.
In order to form a government, they got to negotiate together and get enough to come together to get a majority.
Right.
And so, out of all the little parties, they've got these 8 to come together, supposedly to form a government. But any big disagreement between them, when they can't cooperate, the government might fall apart and have to start over again.
Yep, that's the boom or bust.
So that's the parliamentary system.
Yeah. So they took it after World War II when they set up the Israeli land. They looked around at all the countries and said, okay, we want we want to take up the British government, as close to the British government, closer to them anyway, not precisely, but like the British government, where we have a parliament. So now we have this party, this party, and this party. The Likud party is still the most conservative party, or one of the most conservative parties, and it's still the biggest, but they couldn't get, you have to have 62 seats, and they couldn't get 62. So the president, they have a president, and they said, okay, I'm gonna give it to you, go form a coalition. So they go to the Arabs, and they go to the Green Party, they go to the Democrats, they go to the, whatever, and they get these people together. And can you do that? They did it. You did it. But I don't see how it can last. We'll see. And Netanyahu's not done. He's saying he's going to come and tear this thing apart. We'll continue to see. There are some surprising things coming out here. They attacked Gaza the other day. They destroyed there was some missiles coming out of Gaza, so they fired back at them. And there was a couple other conservative things that they did, which were good. But it's going to be interesting to see how this thing holds up, if it does at all. Here's one of the things that's, now that the Abraham Accords is out, so now Israel and these Arab nations were putting in pipelines. We're going to use your pipeline. They're going to buy oil from you. I'm going to transport your oil across my land, Israel says, and we'll transport it to the Med. We'll put it in our pipeline, transport it to Germany. How about that? Oh, we love that idea. So there's the UAE flag and the Israel flag, and they had an agreement. They agreed under Netanyahu that they were going to bring UAE oil to the pipeline and bring it across to Israel and then ship it. And now Israel's new environmental protection minister, which has come in on this coalition now, the state of Israel should not be an oil bridge to other countries. Who does this sound like? When Biden came in, what's the first thing he did? He canceled the pipeline. And I heard the other day, it was in the news the other day, that the Canadian agency, I can't remember if it's Canadian, I think it's Canadian, but they've canceled that project. They said, well, okay, it's done. We're not going to try anymore. But anyway, the UAE is warning Israel not to cancel a pipeline deal. The cancellation of a deal to transport UAE oil through an Israeli pipeline would cause a crisis in relations between Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi, and threaten the stability of a normalization agreement. See how important the oil is in the spoil? The oil is absolutely important in Isaiah chapter 17, Ezekiel 39, and other places. The oil is the spoil. Anyway, you see the problem there. According to a Syrian report, the Israeli army struck an observation point. This was in Syria itself. This was one of those surprising things, that they actually took out a place in the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, this government. So that was a good thing. Don't come over here, they're saying. Just today, emergency shutdown at the nuclear power plant at Bashur. This is along that earthquake fault along there in Iran. I just want to remind you of this. Whenever something happens like this, we go, okay, now who bombed what? This just came out, so we don't know why this is emergency shutdown. Well, the Natanz, remember all the explosions in Iran over the last couple months. Israel's been doing it. We'll see what happens there. Some good news, North American Aliyah. Aliyah means going up. Immigration to Israel spikes after a year of COVID. North Americans more going over. In 2021, 1,000 new immigrants arrived from the U.S. and Canada. Now, I just want to take the last few minutes and go through something that it's just very interesting, okay? We started this last week, and I just want to take a few minutes to go through something. In Deuteronomy 33:2, he said, "The Lord came from Sinai and dawned from Mount Seir," or Seir, but there is a Mount Seir there, "upon us. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came forth with 10,000s of his holy ones, with flaming fire at his right hand." Now, I showed you this last week, and this is kind of a foundation. There's lots of these verses, but this is kind of a foundational one. When did this happen? When was he at Mount Seir? When was he at Mount Paran? And when did he show up with 10,000s of his holy ones? He didn't. He did not. So Moses is a liar. Right? Or there's always a third option. God never lies. Right? Remember as you go through the Old Testament that if it doesn't make sense, if it's weird, it means something. What did Jesus say? You will see me coming in the clouds. What does Revelation 19 say? What does Revelation 19 say about armies of heaven coming with him? Mark 13. But in those days, after the tribulation, okay, right at the end of the 7-year tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And by the way, in another place he says his Father's glory. Okay? And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Yeah, so he's going to come. He's going to be seen in the clouds. And he's coming with his holy ones. He's coming in great majesty. That's Jesus Christ, Yahweh God. Now remember, Isaiah 9:6, he will be called, don't have a problem. John called him our great God, okay? And Isaiah 9:6 says, this child who grows up will be called who? Wonderful Counselor. What's the next one? Mighty God. Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father. They can't be the same, can they? Unless you have a triune God. We have a triune God. Now watch. I showed you a map last week. There are these stars, the blue stars, where there's evidence in the Bible Jesus will return. He will be there. Okay? He's not going to return to there. He's going to there. Where he returns is either Mount Sinai or Mount of Olives. Take your pick. I don't care. We know he goes to Jerusalem. He goes other places. Okay? I showed you some of that last week. I just want to briefly go through a chapter and show you where I'm getting this stuff. All right? There's the promised land. See the perimeters. They go from the Red Sea to the Persian Gulf, all the way to Turkey almost, into Syria. Okay? That's Abraham's land. That's the land promised to him. Okay? That's not the land he got. Hebrews chapter 11 says he didn't get the land. Okay? It's still coming. And then there's the rivers. Okay, God's still at work. I want to read this. Isaiah 11. There shall come forth a fruit from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Now, who's Jesse? David's father, and it was always promised that the root of Jesse would be Jesus, the Messiah, right? We're all clear on that. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon Jesus. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what he sees, or decide disputes by what he hears, but with righteousness, what he knows, what his heart knows, what his spirit knows, is how we should be judging, by the way, with what we know. And decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with a rod of his mouth. No, that's not lovely Jesus coming. That's not the lovely Jesus. That's not the peaceful Jesus. Folks, the peaceful Jesus came when he was a baby. When he tried to bring peace to the earth and they rejected him. All right? He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. And with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. This is not my word, this is his. The reason I'm going through this is because I want you to be ready for it. I want you to understand what is ahead of us. That God is bringing division on this planet and letting the kings, just like Pharaoh, show me your heart. because I'm going to discipline you when you do. Babylonian, Assyrian, show me your heart, because I'm going to whip you when you do. All right? That's why he wants us to be meek and lowly. Then now watch, this is wonderful. The righteous shall be the belt of his waist. Now this is at the same time he's going to strike the earth. Watch. I think this is chronology. He strikes the earth, and then watch. The righteous shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. The wolf shall lay down with the lamb. Well, that's the point that the Sunday school teachers get to, but we never hear, is that he's going to strike the earth, and then the wolf lays down with the lamb. It has to happen. And the leopard shall lay down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion, and the fatted together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the glory of the knowledge of the Lord. We say glory sometimes, as the waters cover the sea. Okay, see, we get the millennial part, we get the peace part, but what has to happen first? David has to conquer his enemies before he gives the kingdom to his son Solomon. You see the typology in the Old Testament? So now watch. Once the lion is laying down with the lamb, okay, in that day, we go back to the root of Jesse, you shall stand as a signal, that's a warrior banner, for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. In that day, the Lord will extend his hand. Listen, this is important. He extended his hand the first time through Moses. By the hand of Moses and by the work of Moses, okay? He extended his hand the first time to bring Israel out of Egypt. He extended his hand, yet he will extend his hand a second time to recover the remnant that remains of his people from Assyria, from Cush, Africa, from Elam, Persia, Iran, from Shinar, Iraq, from Hamath, Syria, and from the coastlands of the sea. Did your Sunday school teacher ever teach you that at the same time the lion lays down with the lamb, or thereabouts, this is happening? We've unhitched from the Old Testament. He will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah. He's going to gather the remnant of Israel from the four corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall depart, and those who harass Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah anymore, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. They shall swoop down on the shoulder of the Philistines in the west. The Philistines are dead, I thought. The land's still there, and the people are still there. And together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall put out their hand against Edom, Jordan, Moab, southern Jordan, Ammonites, northern Jordan, and shall obey them. And the Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and will wave his hand over the river with his scorching breath, and strike it into 7 channels. And he will lead people across in sandals. Who will? Moses?
Is there such a highway from Egypt to Syria today?
There is a certain highway they call a King's Highway, but it'll be wider. It'll be real. And there will be a highway, and what he's saying by highway is that there's going to be peaceful travel between Syria and Egypt, God's enemies. That's what he's saying.
A roadway would be a better word than a highway?
No. It takes away the idea of a free passage. It means a free passage and a wide passage. There's going to be freedom in the surrounding countries that hate Israel. That's what this is saying. As there were for Israel when they came up, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt. See, this is still coming. Don't underestimate what we have not been taught, and it is huge. We have not been taught what the Old Testament is saying is still coming to us. I heard Chuck Missler say over and over and over again that we live in the most exciting times, and we will be in the years soon to come, in the most exciting times in history. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard to watch. But there are more prophecies to be carried out in the future than ever in the past. And as Gary and I think Joe would all agree, that when you read the Old Testament, you have the near prophecies, you have the far prophecies that are intertwined. It's hard to see which one is which, but it's for us to reason out and dig it out and understand it. Because there is so much ahead of us. There's so much glory ahead of us to see Jesus. I'm talking about in him, to watch him and see what he's doing and will do. And we get to be a part of it. But we have to stay on the right side. You have to endure what is happening. No matter how rough the news gets, no matter what happens to our families, no matter what happens, you have to be tough. You have to have your forehead as flint, not your heart. Your forehead as flint, your mind made up that you're going to stand the test of time for Jesus Christ, no matter what happens. Lord God, we worship you and thank you. We honor you, Lord. We praise you. We look forward to seeing you come. Until then, strengthen our hearts, Lord God. Be with us. Help us to endure. Thank you for all the fathers here. Thank you for all the fathers in our churches. Bless them. All the grandfathers, thank you so much, Lord God. Thank you for the mothers. We remember them. Without a mother, there's no father, and vice versa. Thank you so much. Lord, we love your word. We love you, and we can't wait to see your face. Until then, encourage us and strengthen our hearts, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Enjoy this cool weather.